Someone asked me one time, is there a short version of POW life? And I could easily say there's minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, yes, even years of boredom punctuated by terror. President Nixon, when he took office, he was devastated for what he had learned. The Vietnamese were not even fighting their own war. We were fighting the war with our allies, standing shoulder to shoulder. President Johnson was told that the Vietnamese are shooting us in the back. His solution was take their bullets away from them and put the full brunt of the war on the American soldier and our allies. It was LBJ that stood up and said, I'm not going to send American boys to do what Asian boys should do for themselves. And within 2 years, he had over 600,000 combat troops in Southeast Asia fighting the war that we were never supposed to fight. President Nixon understood when he got there, all he had was a army on paper. They did not have anybody that we could turn the war over to. President Nixon spent the next couple of years rebuilding the Vietnamese army, and as they stood up, we stood down. And eventually reached the point where the Vietnamese were able to fight their war with our assistance. They had the manpower, the willpower, they had the airplanes, they had everything needed. In fact, we were still training helicopter pilots at Shepherd Air Force Base in 1974. We were going back to Vietnam. And President Nixon, essentially in December 1972, we had accomplished our mission. We were prepared to turn the war back over to the Vietnamese. The only thing left was the prisoners of war. All the other things had been signed by the Vietnamese, and when discussion of the prisoners of war was brought up, the Vietnamese said, just go in the house, we'll take care of that later. President Nixon said, no, we'll take care of it now. We knew at that point there were French prisoners that had been captured in 1954 and been held prisoner of war and were not released until 1979. And he was not going to allow, nor with the American people, or nor with the American soldier, sailor, airman, marine, or coast guardman would allow their brothers to be left behind. And so he had the whole country behind him when he approved what was referred to as Linebacker 2 in December 1972. In an 11-day period, taking 1 day off for Christmas, we dropped more bombs than ever been dropped in the history of mankind. Not to advance the war, but to secure the freedoms of some 500 plus Americans being held in cages and cells in North Vietnam, South Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos. As a result of that bombing, the Vietnamese came back to the table. And on the 26th of January, 1973, that statement was read from the White House lawn and in the prison camps in North Vietnam to each and every prisoner that the war was over, that we had reached an agreement on the 12th of February would start the release of the prisoners of war and the release of all the combat soldiers in South Vietnam would be returning home with the completion date of 29 March 1973. I always say that was the longest moments in my life as I came home first and had to wait for my brothers to come home. We were hounded by the press warning our story. They didn't give a damn about the ones that were behind me waiting to be released. They were more interested in their purified or haven't I got you statement. And we told them to come back to see us on the 29th of March when the last wheels are up, and we'll talk. But we're not going to do anything to jeopardize the release of those we had to leave behind. When we didn't arrive on the 12th of February, I had the pleasure of celebrating Valentine's Day on my journey back home. I celebrated Valentine's Day in the Philippines, Guam, Hawaii, San Francisco, all in 1 day. eventually arriving home. During that period of time, a friend of mine was asked, could you define freedom? And he simply said, doors with inside knobs. Like an opportunity that we each have, our kids have, our parents, everyone has an opportunity when they can open a door and walk through and enjoy the adventures on the other side. I lost that knob for 2,703 days. We went to different hospitals. We were treated like royalty. We got the parade and the speeches that belong to all of you here. I can't imagine how you felt after you served your country with honor. You came on American soil. Not only did they time it so you came in the middle of the night, there was somebody there from the State Department ordering you to take off your uniform as not to offend anyone. I can't imagine my country doing that to those who love this country so much. I got your welcome, and I'll never forget who made it possible for me to come home. To me, as I look back on my some 80 plus years on this great earth, I'll always say the saddest moment to me is when we forgave those who ran before we as a nation stood up and said thank you to those who served. Even the horrible parts, thank you. Thank you. The hardest part is the fact that, yes, we sent a few cowards to Canada, but they sent us 5 times as many brave men that stood shoulder to shoulder with us as a nation. In terms of losses, we had over 300,000 permanent injured. We, Vietnam veterans, lost more limbs than all the rest of the wars combined. As I mentioned before, 58,000, over 1,500 are still missing in action. Over 20,000 kids grew up without a father. Me personally, only 1 out of 5 aircrew members shot down over Southeast Asia survived. So I can truly say I'm one of the luckiest men alive. The sad part about our generation, we could not separate the word war from warrior. So if the war was bad, the warrior was bad. And it was backed up by Walter Cronkite. He describes the Tet Offensive as we killed, wounded, and captured nearly 45,000 North Vietnamese. We lost 100 brave men, and he called that a defeat for America. And LBJ said, if I've lost Walter Cronkite, I've lost the war. In 1991, when our brothers and sisters, our nieces and nephews, our sons and daughters, and the neighbor's kid down the street, they went off to fight another war. Guess who reared their head again? It was the Kennedys, the Fonders, and the Carries that took to the airways to criticize our young men and women in uniform. And it was with the Vietnam veterans who stood up and said, hell no, not again. As a result of the actions of our veterans, we have been able to separate those 2 words, war and warrior. How you feel about a war That's your feeling. But how you feel about our warriors, that's our responsibility to make sure that one generation of veterans are never, never abandoned by another. In closing, I want to share with you the words of a friend of mine who's long since passed. But he said, during my years of captivity, one idea has dominated my thinking: how fortunate I am to be an American. I have seen the other side. I have had every real and imaginative thought of the United States of America pointed out to me time and time again by my captors. But I have returned with a strong conviction, although we are far from perfect, our system excels all others on earth, and our basic ideas and principles are honorable and just. I can't help but think about Dave standing there, and he read this last paragraph. He was looking into the young eyes of our young warriors who have raised their right hand and said, "Take me, I want to defend America." When he expressed the confidence in them to get the job done, when he said, "I have faith that we will continue to work for a peaceful world and freedom while firmly resisting those who enslave mankind." That's the burden we place on our young people, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, Coast Guard. They are the ones in the Space Force. They are standing on the front lines, and God knows where, for the freedoms that we enjoy every day. It was Ronald Reagan who said, "Some people spend an entire lifetime wondering if they made a difference." Our armed forces doesn't have that problem. An old friend of mine from Kodiak, Tennessee, just down the road from here, he gave me a bumper sticker that I proudly display in my room, and it simply says, "Only two defining forces ever offered to die for you: Jesus Christ and the American soldier. One for your soul and the other for your freedom." You know, in this great land of ours, some people dream the dream. Some people live the dream. Our armed forces, you defend that dream. God bless the defenders of the dream. Thank you.